Good afternoon. It is Dr. B again, and it's the day after yesterday, as most days are. And last night I had put up a video. We're calling it video 1 for week 4. This is video 2 for week 4. And what we'll do with this is go into some more material as far as what's expected as you get more serious about what this course is about. So I'm going to not try to waste too much of your time. I'm going to bring up the agenda that you have that is already posted in the module. Now I'm going to repost it just so you know that. I'm going to repost it with some video links that you're going to see in a moment, and also the link to this particular YouTube. So you'll need both of the videos and both of the agendas to truly understand what they're about. And so what I'm going to do is share the screen and take off. So we take off. Try to make things right by what you're trying to do. All right, now the first thing I want to speak to is not on this agenda. I took it off, I believe. Did I take it off? No, I didn't actually. I kept it. And that would be, and I mentioned this last night, but I'm repeating it again, and I'll be repeating it for a couple of weeks as I find more answer your questions about the change in the syllabus and enable you to do what you need to do. What I'm advising you is that we're going to drop an assignment. I'm not sure which assignment yet. Okay, I think probably the parent engagement piece. Come to think of it, because it works well with what we're trying to get done anyway. I'm not sure about that yet, but that's where I'm probably going to lean. But don't take that for gospel for yet. We're going to drop an assignment, and that assignment in compensation will be in addition to the internship expectation. Not really in addition, actually, it works for you, because what we're going to do is I'm going to grant you 3 hours of internship activity that you can chart, and I'll sign off on at the end of the semester, where you're going to show how you've worked with your building administrator to advertise that there's a special conference that's going on. I think it's March 16, 17, and 18 in next month, just about a month from now, a little more than a month from now, sponsored by the Bilingual Association of New York State. It's a pretty strong association. I happen to know the president a little bit, and I feel that she knows what she's doing. I certainly can guarantee you that. And it's a good conference. Not that any one of you would be expected to attend all of the 3 days. By the way, if you go, I'll give you more internship time. But it is out in Wading River, and I'm presuming that most of you don't live anywhere near Wading River. I probably live closest to Wading River, and I live a good 30, 40 minutes from it, because I'm out here on the island. So it's a little bit of a jog to get out to this place. A pretty place too, actually. It's lovely town. So right on the North Shore, overlooking the Long Island Sound. It's a nice place to be. My wife wanted to move there about 10 times, but we won't move away from the 7 grandchildren who are within spitting distance of us as we speak. So the bottom line is, you need to go to your building administrator, and you need to request assistance or advise her or him of this internship requirement that you're taking on, which will enable you to contact parents of children in ENL program, and teachers for that matter, who might want to take advantage of going to this particular activity. And you'll just show what you do and work with, and I'll probably model this for you too a little bit, to show how you get the word out and to take that onto yourself. It's a perfect assignment for the PSEL standard for parent engagement, obviously. And a few things are more important to get parents engaged in the kinds of things that you're trying to promote as you acquire 2 muscles. One muscle is ENL certification to service those students, a growing number of students who are in great need of effective and innovative programs, and by the same token, also find ways to engage parents to support that. And then the other muscle that you're getting and I wouldn't say one is more important than the other, but they certainly do go together. And I applaud the St. John's for being part of this effort, where you also get a building leader's license to know how to do these kinds of things. That is to say, in this case, get publicity out properly. Lots of ways to do that nowadays, and to engage people, to know about, and to communicate with them about what's going on insofar as this particular program is concerned. One of the modules in Canvas has the PDF flyer. Feel free to take it, print it out, do what you want to do with it to work it through. And we'll continue to talk about that, but I do want to keep that up in front of your headlights so that you don't forget that it's about. I've already gone over the point that you should be reviewing the assignments in the calendar. I'm probably going to take that parent engagement assignment out and in place use this. By the way, if you're not in the Project Leader program, but you are in this class, would you please let me know? I'm not sure who is not in this class. If you're in a doctoral class, for example, and taking this course to substitute for something in the doctoral program, I don't know that. Not lying to you, I just don't know that. So if you are in one of those people who don't want to do this Project Leader task, let me know, and then I'll figure something out for you to do in lieu of that as such. I've given you 2 questions for this coming week that I'll do next week. One of them is to discuss any aspect of Dr. Koz's book. We spent some time talking about that yesterday, talking about the assignment. Talking about the chapter 1 of that book. And I find it's a pretty intriguing book. And what you should be doing is telling your colleagues what you think interests you about what the book's about. You're not expected to have read the book by this point, but you are expected to have read the book by the end of the semester, because you have the major assignment, in which I'm going to talk about in a moment. Okay, so next piece is you have a journal question. The journal questions I try to base off the readings from Tomlinson and or from Fullen. Certainly, if you have other places that you will want to, I'm talking very fast, am I not? Certainly, if there are other places that you want to pull points of view from, feel free to do that. And so there's two mini assignments coming up. One of them is to discuss aspects of Dr. Koz's book that intrigue you, and I hope that you'd be talking to each other about that. And the other one is to, in the journal assignment, to answer those questions about, from your point of view, from your readings, from your experiences, and any other sources that you think are relevant. Comment on the extent to which how you think schools, American schools, connect teaching to teaching in the following ways. And there they are. And I think there's some pretty important issues, which we'll talk more about in a little bit when I get to the actual chapter conversations. Now, what I did at the end of last night's video was just briefly speak to chapter 1. I'm not even going to go to chapter 2 today. I think chapter 1 is enough. We did a bit about chapter 1. I pointed out some important issues. I will go back and remind you that if you look at, I'm probably jumping ahead of myself a little bit too quickly. I'm trying to find the. Oh, I'm in the wrong book. That's why I can't find it. There's a template in Dr. Koz's first book. I'm on my electronic book now. I can't find it specifically. I want to say it's 1.2 in chapter 1. It's a template about what a unit, or rather an action plan, should begin to look like. And we're going to spend considerable time on that in a moment, because I want to give you the skills. And I did talk about this yesterday. I want to give you the skills that you need to do this. For 2 reasons, as I mentioned yesterday. One is that they're valuable. And by the way, I should also add, I'm being a little smug about this for you, as you would be surprised how many principals you're working for who don't have those skills, have not been trained to do this expectation, how to create a strategic plan or an operational plan. They don't know how to do that, which is kind of sad. Enough said about that. The other piece is, and I said I wasn't proud of it when I said it yesterday, and I'm not any more proud today to say that this is on the test, that certification exam we talk about, not the specific topic, but you'll be given an essay question, so to speak, where you need to show that you've got these skills. because these are skills of change implementation. Everybody has, we ought to do this, we ought to do that. Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? And then more often than not, the plans fall apart. Guy I used to work with had a saying that he took from a poem, actually, a very famous poem called Paradise Lost that you probably studied in high school, that basically says, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Now, when he said it, he was saying it because he didn't want to do the work to put a plan in place. So he would say, well, that's not it's the road to hell. This is really what he was driving at, which used to annoy me greatly when he did say it. But he is right in the sense that it's one thing to say we ought to. It's another thing to put it in the streets, put it on the ground, get the traction to make it happen. And I will say I have a considerable experience with that. So we're going to go into that in a moment. I'm going to get you going. It's really what I'm going to get you going right now. So you'll see, let me show you two things quickly. You're going to see in this space another video link, which would be the link for this. And then you're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4 video links. Now, each of those videos, I think the longest one is 7 minutes long. Their average is probably around 5 minutes. It's not as though you should watch each of these videos in one fell swoop, although you certainly can. But I do want you to watch these videos because these videos will reinforce what I'm about to begin to teach you straight away in terms of getting that template to work, that action plan to look the way it should look. First one is how you do needs assessments. My heavens. People think they know what they need, but they don't know what they need because they haven't done the root causes, which is the next 2 videos down. How do you get the information, the data, the qualitative and the quantitative data, not one over the other, both sets of data? How do you get the data to make the determination that you have a need? Now, I'm going to model that in a broad sense, but one of the things you need to do is think about, and this is a dangerous question, but here it comes. What do you think is a problem in the administration, not necessarily the administration, in the State of the Union, insofar as how the ENL programs are operating in your school? I'm going negative here now, not positive. You can say, oh, everything's well, everyone's smiling, everyone's passing the test. That's great. The nicest SLAT test. That's fantastic. I doubt that it's true, but if it's true, that's fantastic. What I'm talking about is how do you recognize the issues that are going on? Now, I'm going to give you 2 off the top of my bald head without even breathing hard. One is the ENL teacher and the general education teachers communicating with each other. How well are they collaborating? In many schools, they are not. In many schools, there's a mental model, and we talked about mental models in terms of systems disciplines, I think 2 weeks ago, where the mental model is, those kids aren't my problem, so says the general education teacher. That belongs to the ENL teacher, and I don't have anything to do with that. I can't teach those kids. Sometimes you hear the same thing said about, I can't teach those kids, and let's go find the special education teacher. Those are the 2 best examples, worst/best examples of that. That's a problem, because then we know when the collaboration is missing, then we need to figure out. Well, then we recognize that there's the issues of alignment, there's issues of communication between the 2 groups, insofar as, and who suffers for that? The kids, the children, and so that's an issue. Another issue is that perhaps the curriculum isn't aligned in the ENL program. Now, those are 2 issues. They just come to mind very quickly from having administered ENL programs for longer than many of you were alive, and from having listened to people talk to me about, even actually in some of my other classes, about the lack of communications, the misunderstanding of what the roles of teachers are. All those things already exist. I'll give you a quick example. I was in a building a couple of years ago, high school, and the E&L teacher was giving me a tour of the high school, a huge place, as most of them are. And as I got to one separate wing of the school, big locked doors. There was a cafeteria in there, like a sort of like a large group instruction place, and there were several classrooms along this wing. And the teacher proceeded to tell me that this was the E&L wing. And all of the E&L students in the high school were housed in that wing. They were not allowed to join the rest of the population during the rest of the day. Oh, heavens to Betsy. So I asked, well, what's that about? Well, we think it's best for them. And I said, well, why do you think it's best for them? And we played with that a little bit. The only thing I thought was probably a legitimate thing, although I wish it were not true, was that they were trying to protect those kids from gangs in the school. And apparently there was a major issue in that school. I kind of understood that. Isolating and segregating them, this just didn't make sense to me other than that. So there's a solution that somebody came up with that to instruct those students, enable them to get over the issue they need to get over in order to function academically and socially, emotionally in a high school, and to move on into post-high school careers or educational venues. It just was extremely bothersome as such. So this first issue here of needs assessment, that's the first thing you need to do. You need to think of an issue that you think exists, and then you need to come up with an issue come up with the data that gives you more information about it in order to come up with these next two pieces here. And we'll talk more about them in a minute. What we call the root causes. What's the root causes that are at play here? What are the root causes? What's really underneath the issue? I'm going to show you some things about that, but these videos are going to truly help you get that plan off the ground. In fact, what I'm going to do, I was going to do this separately. I'm going to do it right here. I'm going to show you an action plan template. Okay. Every action plan has a goal. Every action plan has strategies that bring off that goal. Every action plan has, and now I'm going to switch it around a little bit. Every action plan has criteria to measure the success of the strategies that are put in place. Every action plan has a timetable. Every action plan identifies resources that you need to bring off the strategy. Every action plan, I have to add another column, I see, has the person's responsible. I'm going to change that. Every action plan should recognize what obstacles are in place. What could go wrong? And every action plan, let's say who was responsible. Now understand this little template I'm giving you, okay? And this is just a sample. We're going to keep coming back to this. Every action plan basically has these pieces in it. Sometimes it doesn't have obstacles, which I think is a mistake, which is why I always make sure it's in there. I'm going to highlight that one. And sometimes people don't give enough love. Kind of hard to understand why they don't do it, but and again, I can't fit it in the way I want. To how are they going to measure or evaluate whether the strategies they put together are the strategies? Now I'm talking quickly here, and not this is the last assignment. You're going to present this assignment at the end of the semester, so you have plenty of time to begin to get your toes in the water on it. Would be to say, okay, what's my goal? One goal. I'm going to change this because what's my vision? What's my mission? Insofar as E&L programs and students are involved within the context of multi-age classrooms or multi-age schools, I guess, is a better way to put it. All right, now read this one carefully. This is a tough one to swallow. Not swallow, but it's a tough one to take into your heads, I think. What's your goal is to come up with a vision and a mission, and they're not the same thing. I'll talk about that next week. They sound like they are, but they're really not. A vision and a mission insofar as how you recognize children's E&L children's needs, students' needs, okay? And if you can, okay? I'm going to change the color on this one. Just differentiate a little bit on there. Within the context of multi-age classrooms. So you're going to read that book and you're going to see lots of ideas, okay? And those ideas are going to give you ideas about what the vision should be. I'm going to show you how to do this. It's not something you have to do today, all right? And but what that's going to generate are strategies. I'm not going to give you one right now, okay? One thing you're going to do is identify potential issues. And the next strategy would be how. I'm not going to call that. You're going to do a needs assessment. How are you going to do your needs assessment? And you don't know how to do that yet. I'm going to teach that to you. Okay. And the next question would be, what root causes does the needs assessment suggest? I'm going to show you how to do that. All right. And that's it. That'll be all we'll need to talk about for the moment. But let's just walk through this. So a potential issue I'm going to call is communication. Now, how do I know that it's communication? Well, you're going to do that through your needs assessment. You're going to talk to students. You're going to talk to teachers, talk to mommies. And you're going to try to find out whether everybody's on the same page, or everybody understands. You're going to interview people. You may want to survey people. You may want to look at some sort of data analysis. And you're going to come to some tentative conclusions. Then you're going to go to root causes. The root causes is one of my favorite things to teach people. And I'm not going to beat it to death today as such, but these two strategies here, 5Y and fishtails. You don't have to do both of them. You can do one. Oh, wonderful, especially 5Y. 5Y is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to watch a better video about it than I'm doing for you now. But the 5Y basically says, if you ask a why question 5 times based on the original question, you're going to get down to the root causes, what really is underneath. So when someone says to you, well, these kids don't want to learn, you say, well, why do you think that? Well, they don't do any work for me. Well, why don't they do any work for you? I don't know. They don't hand anything in. Why don't they hand anything in? I don't know. I think maybe they don't understand the assignment. Why don't they understand the assignment? I don't explain it very well. Aha, 5 times? And we get to the real root cause. You're not explaining the assignment? That's a root cause. Why aren't teachers communicating about E&L programs and kids? Just play that through in your head. Maybe I'm just giving you a quick one here. Maybe they don't understand what they don't understand what one program does versus another. Maybe they don't have class time, or I should say, collaborative time built in. That's often the case, by the way. So you're going to come up with strategies. Now, someone's going to say, how many strategies, Dr. Bernardo? And I'm going to say, I don't know. Not yet. I just gave you 3 strategies. So what do you think the next piece would be? I'm going to put a question mark here rather than tell you. We'll come back to that next week. Let me change the color so I remember that. Once you figure out the root causes, then what do you do? And you know where I'm taking you on this. Now, once I've come up with this, a strategy. Now, I said one of the strategies, and I apologize because this chart is not cooperating with me. If one of the strategies is to change schedules so that the teachers can talk to each other, that's for collaborative purposes. That's a pretty easy thing. Well, I take it back. It's not an easy thing to do in a schedule. It's kind of difficult. But suppose you were able to do that. Now, here's the question. And you're a leader now. Don't forget, you're not just sitting back saying, Mr. Smith, tell me what to do. You're the one. You're the Mr. and Miss or Ms. Smith here. And they say to you, well, how do you know this worked? Give me multiple criteria for that. I'll give you 2 very, very quickly. One would be that they sat together once a week and talked to each other and took notes on things they needed to work on. Another one would be, and I hate to put it this way, but it works well, the students start to respond to academics in both places, in the general classroom, if they're in general classrooms, as well as in the ENL programs, or not. So I see grades going up. I see NYSERDA scores going up. I see teachers coming up with collaborative strategies. So I need criteria. In this day and age, you cannot get away without having criteria. Now, criteria is a biggie. I'm going to make that one red. All right, so you can see where I'm coming from with this. That's a biggie because you need it, and you'll be asked this question. Well, Ms. Smith, you came up with this action plan. How will we know that you're having your teachers are collaborating better? How will we know that the students are benefiting from that? How will we know that we're meeting this vision goal we haven't come up with yet? The next piece is more difficult than it looked. When is this going to happen? Well, I'm going to change the schedule tomorrow. Well, I'm going to put that in place next September. I can't change it now. It's February. Well, I'm going to try to pilot it now in February of 23, and then I'm going to put it in place in September for everybody. You got to think that through. A hint here is, /suggestion would be that you pilot things when you can. You pilot things small. You try an idea out, and then and you know how to measure it, so that when you but if it goes south, if it doesn't work, you're not hurting the Western world. You just got a couple of things to fix. You fix it. You pilot it, and then you roll it out to everybody else later on. Now, what do you need? If you're going to say money, I'm going to say fine. In a real plan, I would say how much, but I'm not going to do that to you. But you tell me how. By the way, when you fool around with a schedule, for example, you're spending money. You're fooling around with class loads, teacher loads, class sizes, more complicated than you think. But money is always a resource. Time is maybe an even more important resource. And sometimes people say, well, money is time, time is money. That's probably true. But yes, the time issue. It also is that might mean you need to take time away from something else that's not as important, which is a difficult thing to do in a school schedule. Everybody thinks they're the most important thing in the school. You can tell the football coach that we're going to have less time to practice football, and you're going to have 100 parents and 10 coaches standing in front of your office the next day. Or you're going to take away from the music program or from special education services. You've got to be careful with this. You got to find some way to balance that out. So you do need to know what your resources are. One is expertise too. And by the way, like for example, there are consultants you know, I'm a consultant, so I'm not advertising my consult work, but there's there are people out there who do this for nothing. They won't expect to get paid to help you figure this out. A lot of college professors love to do those kind of things. Okay. And the last piece is like, who's going to do this? If you say the PTA or the principal or the teachers, I'm going to take off my cyber shoe and throw it at you. Now, I'm not asking you to name the name of your principal, but I think you need to name a title pretty carefully, because it isn't all the principal, it isn't all the teachers. So I try to identify who these people, the director of ENL, the director of people personnel services, the custodian sometimes will be a person responsible for some of these things. And you begin to play this out. Now, what I want you to do for me for next week is email me an issue you think is out there. And then I want you to, after you watch these videos, I want you to give me some sort of narration in an email. This is when I wish I had a real class with you folks. Email me. All right, just email me what you're thinking. That's all. After having watched this video, it's not a discussion question. Email me specifically, one-on-one. I did this and I really thought this was the greatest thing. I can't believe I never knew this. Okay, you're John Dewey, Dr. Bernardo. I don't expect you to tell me that, but or you say, I've done this a million times and it's a lot of junk. Or I never thought of approaching it this way. And here's some things I thought about, especially in terms of the issues. A multi-age classroom approach, and leave that to the side if you can't get your arms around that yet. But if you're just thinking about your desire to lead a program that's more effective to meet the needs of ESL, ENL, bilingual babies, just tell me what you're starting to think. But don't do that until you look at those those videos up top. Again, the other one is, I didn't model fishtail. Fishtail is very simple. You'll see what that's about. The 5 why is the important one. If you want to have fun with your family, your own children, or your classrooms tomorrow, or in the faculty room, try that out on people, because what will happen is they'll throw their shoes at you because it makes your hair hurt if you really press it properly. Watch the video and then try something out on somebody and see what happens. My own daughters used to run the other way when I used to do this because they hated it. But they began to think differently. They began to realize that sometimes when this, that, or the other thing was going on, it was really a more fundamental issue. Something deeper than mommy and daddy wanted them to clean up their room kinds of things. And the SWOT chart I'll save for next week. But you should watch the video, though. I'll show you how to do this. I'm going to teach you these skills. And you're going to be able to translate those skills to 2 places. To this chart, in the end, not today, okay? To a chart that's going to have many more rows than this right now. The columns are pretty much fixed. But the strategies is where it's all at here. So we're going to keep adding to this as we go along the next several weeks to get you ready for that. Pay attention to what you think your vision is. Don't be afraid to try any kind of idea. Don't be afraid to figure out what strategies you want to do. Well, actually, let's change this for a second. No, I'm going to leave it alone. You're going to identify the issues you think are going on. Then you're going to do, how am I going to know more about this? By way of a needs assessment process. Then you're going to use root causes, 5 whys, the fishtail, which is actually a Japanese technique called Ishiwaka, and whatever else you can think of to start to get your motor running. Again, I do not expect you to complete this chart. You can complete it in your head. You can complete it just as a draft, but don't send me that. Just tell me what you're thinking after you've watched these videos and after you've seen this video, the one I'm giving you right now. Okay? So we walked our way through that. We've already skipped the housekeeping goals and the journal. We've done all of this. And we've begun to take a look at rooting out root causes related to project leaders. I just modeled it for a moment. It was kind of, maybe next week I'll have you root cause with each other online. I'll show how I can do that because you're asynchronous. And this is really a big issue here. What do you know? I think you realize I like to color code things. What do you know? What do you not know? What do you not know that you don't know? I was teaching another class. It was not your class. I was teaching a class a couple of weeks ago, school district leader class, and I was walking them through the school district leader licensing processes and some assignments I had put together that I've given to school district leader classes for a very long time and very effectively. And then finally, one of the students was a Zoom class, a synchronous Zoom class, said, Dr. Bernardo, do you know that most of us are not administrators? Now, I assumed that they were because it was a school district leader course. It wasn't a school building leader course. So I didn't realize that I didn't know that until I knew it. And they also told me that they didn't have the same investment in some things that I did. I'm smiling, but it kind of bothers me a little bit, to be honest with you. And sometimes you have to kind of ask that question: what do you not know that you don't know? It's easy enough to say, okay, I don't know how many House of Congressmen there are in the borough of Brooklyn. So I can look that up. I can get the answer to that. What do I not know? Maybe I don't know that I don't know that I don't know what I don't know. And those are the things that I need to know in order to get my needs assessment square. That needs assessment muscle is a biggie. It's not something we typically do. Here's what typically happens is a principal takes a look at data. Sometimes she'll have a data committee or a reading teacher who's really good at these things. Or she'll run a faculty meeting and say, here's the data. Here's how we did on the NYSESLAT. We had an 80% pass rate. And I broken it down, and the newest students to the program were the ones who didn't make it, and the more senior ones, more experienced children, made it across the finish line. What does that tell us? And people will offer points of view, and then if they're good, we're talking about a good principal. The other way she could do it, and maybe you've experienced this more often than what I just modeled for you, would say, hey, 80% of the students passed the NYSESLAT exam. 20% didn't. And the 20% who didn't were the students with less than 5 years experience. So, hey, folks, keep doing what you're doing, because those kids will get the experience and they'll pass later. And again, I haven't got a lot of hair to pull out of my head, but that would make me absolutely nuts, because that's not the way you engage a faculty to do a needs assessment. It just isn't. It's, the king or the queen talking from on high, rolling hierarchically down the field to tell people what they need to know, instead of giving them a chance to contribute to what everyone needs to know and everyone needs to contribute to in terms of the kind of strategies we need to talk about. So you think about that, how a principal might roll data out. Now, that's quantitative data, obviously. But how do you handle that? Okay? And that goes back to some of these issues we're talking about here. Now, let's just quickly go over to both the professional capital books we've been talking about, both the professional capital book out of Fullen and Hargraves, and out of, and by the way, I think I promised you I'm going to have a video podcast of two of my doctoral students who have been to Finland, and we just can't get a date together. We're going to do that. That's something I promise you we will do. And what you'll see in his chapter 5 from the Fullen book, he talks about they talk about Pasi Sahlberg, who was kind of the godfather of the Finland educational system that's received so much acclaim over the course of the last 10, 15, 20 years, and rightly so. And what they talk about is, what Sahlberg talks about is that professional autonomy. And this is an issue. Somebody commented in an email to me the other day about learning about the flaws of our school systems in America. And this is, I think, is a major issue. Where there's a doctoral class, I would say there's a dissertation in that. So if you happen to be a doctoral student in this class and you're looking for a dissertation, call me up because we can talk about how we can develop a great dissertation study along those lines about professional autonomy. And the question is, let's take it on two levels, broadly and then more specific to you as teachers. The first question was, to what extent do you feel that your school leaders give you autonomy to make choices, instructional choices about how to deal with children? And I'm thinking again of the same person I mentioned earlier, but who said that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Was so fearful of the teachers doing, my word, their own thing, taking their own professional judgment into account to teach the expectations of a given subject or topic. So fearful of it that he didn't let them do it. And so everybody was told, this is what you need to teach. This is the topic. This is how you do it. And a lot of teachers said, yes, sir. And when I had and did what they were told. And what they were able to do when you do it that way, and I'm being a wise guy when I say this, but I'm sincere about it, is what they're able to do, if that's the case, is they're able to assure themselves of a low level, no, take it back, a relatively higher level of mediocrity, because you bring everybody to the same standard because everybody does the same thing across every class. And I was a principal. A few things made me more crazy. When I would have a parent call me up and say, I want my Johnny out of Mrs. Smith's class because Mr. Smith uses computers more than she does. So I want my baby to do that rather than whatever that this teacher was doing. And I understood how that person's concern. I respected it, actually. But it wasn't as though I felt I had the right to go into Mrs. Smith's class and say, hey, I need you to do more technology to keep the parent happy. I couldn't do that because I felt that teacher, who happened to have a good reputation for doing a lot of good things, was also extremely effective at other parts that Mr. Smith wasn't so good at. And so I went with that, but I did understand the issue. So this other leader I'm talking about felt it was really, really kind of safe to make sure everybody did the same thing along the lines. I know this at one time was true in the city school systems. Pretty sure they've moved away from it. I hope that they have. I haven't heard the complaint in a long time. And the complaint was that I lost a train of thought. I hate when I get messages on my wrist. Come back, Bernardo. If a principal walked in to observe a teacher, and they looked at, right now, my clock says it's 1:36, and the teacher's weekly plans that I read over said that from 1:30 to 1:45, this teacher was supposed to teach spelling, and this teacher was not teaching spelling, was in fact doing health or something else, that they would call that teacher to task and say, you said this was the time we were doing health, doing spelling. How come you're not doing spelling? I wouldn't survive in a system like that for more than 3.5 minutes, personally, because I relished, I cherished, I internalized my need for professional autonomy. And very luckily, I had principals and chairs who, for the most part, trusted me to do that, to be autonomous, and yet at the same time share the vision of the building to assure myself that the children were going to meet the objectives that the expectations were for the children as they were appropriate. So when Pasi Sahlberg talks about autonomy in schools, he's also talking about deep professional training. Now think about your own training. I'm not sure, I don't know how old you are, but however long ago it was when you came through your certification training, an undergraduate and perhaps in graduate level courses, whether you were taught how to be autonomous whether you were taught how to make your own decisions and to think that way, to go into a faculty room and say, I don't know, I had trouble today teaching the initial consonant B. I'm not sure you're supposed to teach the initial consonant B as a reading teacher, but if you think that's important, I guess it is important to some extent, then would another teacher sitting at that with the coffee mug in front of her say, I have trouble too. Anybody have any ideas about that? And then when another teacher stands up and says, hey, this is what I try. What do you think? How would we know whether that really works? Let's have a conversation. That's a professional, collaborative conversation in the faculty room of all places, or in some kind of grade level meeting, or some other way, a system where teachers are expected to exchange ideas, respect each other's ideas, build off each other's ideas, to do the right thing, to be professionally autonomous. And that's a big thing. I think that, quite frankly, was the biggest issue I saw in this particular chapter of Fullen. And over, I think it's on page 107. I'm working from my electronic book here, where Sahlberg, or rather Fullen and Hargreaves, advocate countries, or certainly the United States is being part of this, where teachers not only work together, but know how to work together, where they can be transparent with each other, and be honest with each other, not say, I can't do this, and therefore I'm not a great teacher. Everyone's got weaknesses along the way, where they can look at the system as a whole with a W, where they can feel collectively responsible for how well children are doing against multiple sets of criteria, not just a test, okay? And whether they can continue to acquire knowledge. Now, all of you, again, I'm not being an ageist here, I hope, but all of you, many of you, will lament sooner or later, to me, or not to me, I haven't seen too much of that, a little bit I have seen, when they say, well, the older teachers aren't interested in changing. If you read the Fullen book, you see that there are levels of evolution of what teachers are about. That there is certainly there's truth to that. I know I'm an old guy, and I don't teach in grade levels in K-12 world anymore, though I was probably the most fun I've ever had. But for example, when I'm in three different universities, each of them has a different learning management system. One has Blackboard, one has Canvas, one has something called Brightside. Those are new things the old guy has to learn. And sometimes I struggle, I wouldn't say I resist it, but I realize I have to sort of step back and accept these are changes I need to know. I have a book that I've just had published. Actually, it's not out yet. It's going to be published after the summer, where I'm going to advocate an old method to teaching social studies that nobody uses. It's so much to the fact that no one uses it, that in fact it's a new method. And I'm going to try some of those things out on you before we get it, well, before the course is finished as well. But I'm painfully aware that people who aren't familiar with a given innovation can, for the most part, maybe not for the most part, but can be frightened by it, feel insecure about it. And the good leader has to find ways to give everybody a sense of security that they can move forward on that. And what I really like is on page 109 of the Fullen book, and I wish I could bring it up on the phone, on TV. On the monitor, I don't know how to do that. So you'll see it there. Please look at this. It's figure 5.1, where Fullen and Hargreaves offer a formula. I love formulas. I was pretty good in math, but I don't think I was that good that I could put together these kinds of things. But here it is. Now hear this, and then read this section very carefully, and probably include it in some of your discussion responses. Professional capital is a function of human capital, the teacher, okay, of social capital, the ability to interact and support, and decisional capital, That is to say, the autonomy word we spoke about. Those three things together, okay, HC, human capital, times SC, social capital, times DC, decisional capital, multiply them, and that becomes your professional capital. So if I gave numbers to this, and I'm just making this up off the top of my bald head, okay, on a scale of 1 to 3, my school has plenty of good human capital. That's a 3. And my school social capital is it's a 2. And decisional capital, that's a 0 or a 1. We don't give people autonomy. So 3 times 2 is 6. Times 1 is 6. So my scale, whatever my scale would be, is 6. Now, I mean, if you're in your own head, if you figured that out, if you give yourself that little test, what would the number be? Email me that too, please, if you can remember to do that. I would love to know that. And so, and then again, the rest of that chapter really goes in and talks about it in great detail. Personally, I'm most interested in decisional capital. On the very last section on page 116 is a big issue I will come back to later on. We're doing this anyway, insofar as how this class is operating. It's called reflective practice. I used to do this, but now I realize, I'm happy to say I stopped doing it pretty early. You create a lesson, teach the lesson, and never think about whether the lesson was any good or not. I do that sometimes in my college lessons, I think sometimes. Oh, I did it wonderful. I'm the answer to everybody's prayers. And then sometimes I get an assignment back based on my lesson, and I say, I could blame them, or I could say to myself, something I missed the mark on, something I didn't do right by. And really, it's all about reflective practice, which is a major tool. I'm going to model this for you in a separate class, which might be part of that action plan you're going to pull together. It's a major tool in improving yourself. If you go to the gym and you can only do 10 pull-ups and you wanted to do 20, so well, what do I need to do to get to 20? Professors and teachers don't always think that way. But really, that's about reflective practices, what you do to move to the next place as such, which means you have to be honest with yourself, which isn't always the case for some people. All right, so that's a good chapter. And Tomlinson pretty much talks to the same premise, but it's so much, I might even do a third video this week. I like the Tomlinson chapter about professional culture and communities, because that's all about reflective inquiry. And I think I will do a separate video on that. Maybe not this week, but next. Now let's back up and start again. I gave you 2 videos, some 2 pretty long things. I pumped the premise of the internship activity. Do not forget that. That's something you cannot forget. All right. I also gave you several video links to look at your leisure. You don't have to do them all in one week, but you certainly need to take a look at them. We talked about Dr. Koz's book in yesterday's video. In this course today, I showed you those 4 videos for you to look at. Again, they're all brief, and I modeled what your action plan will look like, minus some big chunks. That's not complete. And I want you to kind of consider what it is you need to do in order to meet that need. Okay, and we went heavily into Sahlberg by way of Follin and Hargraves to really think about this issue of professional capital, that formula, and professional capital insofar as valuing you as leaders, valuing professional autonomy. The last question of the day might be, if you thought that there were issues in your E&L, I keep calling it ESL, E&L, your bilingual programs, whichever approaches you may be using in your school, if you thought there were issues associated with that, you would use the 5 whys and the fishtails and the needs assessments to reflectively practice, and maybe do some action research too, which I'll talk about next week too. So you got a lot of things to do. Feel free to email me or text me, or call me if you need to pull these pieces together. This week's assignments and these presentations have a lot of things to think about. Okay. And with that, I'll talk to you soon.